For all those who appreciate the work that we're doing here on Standing for Truth, please hit that subscribe button because we are just getting started. All right, guys, looks like we are live on Standing for Truth. And I got to say, tonight I am excited. We have the much anticipated debate between PraiseIAm and Cygnus Ustus. Both have debated on this channel before. And tonight we are debating the topic of slavery. So this should be exciting. As always, we're going to have a Q&A from the audience, okay, following the debate. So please tag me with your questions at Standing for Truth. That'll be the best way I can see your questions. So before I introduce the debaters, though, I want to cover a few things and also go over a few reminders, okay? Guys, 2021 has been off to a great start, a phenomenal start. I knew it wouldn't be easy to top 2020, okay? But so far, we have had a ton of great shows, a ton of great debates, great interviews, great discussions, and many more to come. So make sure to stay up to date on our upcoming live stream section, okay? And I'll be doing my best to schedule every event in advance to give people the opportunity to set a reminder. That being said, I'd like to point out that between all our channels, the main channel and our secondary channel, we are well over 10,000 subscribers with well over 1 million views. So all of this could not have been possible if it wasn't for our amazing supporters. You guys are the life and blood of this channel. So I wanted to thank everybody for their amazing support for making all of this possible, okay? So, yeah, like I said, check the upcoming live stream section. We got a ton of great debates and interviews. In April, we got some really big debates, as well as a 2-day global flood event, okay, where we've got a couple experts here who are going to be doing presentations, but followed by an audience Q&A, not only for creationists, but also for the critics. So you can put forth your objections, your questions, and we're going to do our best to answer those, okay? So enough for me. You guys came here to see the debaters, PraiseIAm and Cygnus. So I am going to bring them into the show right now. Gentlemen, thanks so much for being here. PraiseIAm and Cygnus. Like I said, thanks for giving us your time for tonight's debate. Before we get right into the debate and the introductions, as we typically do, we like to kind of break the ice. Both of you have been here before, so you're no strangers, but why don't we start off with a brief introduction as to who you are, maybe, what will people see if they go check out your channel or ministry or whatever it is. So why don't we start with Cygnus. Cygnus, thanks again for being here.
No problem. This is my second debate with you. Can you hear me? Just do a sound check.
You're all good.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. So this is my second debate here with Standing for Truth, and about my personal background. I work in information technology. I have an undergraduate degree in behavioral psychology and a graduate degree in corporate finance. Neither of which has too much to do with this discussion. So what I know about science when I do a science debate is pretty much learned on my own, and when I'm talking about the Bible, it's also pretty much learned on my own. I did not go to any sort of seminary school or anything like that. My other interests are in philosophy and morality and human rights. So those are things I'm big on, and that's all I think you need to know about me.
Awesome. Great introduction. I appreciate you being with us here again tonight, Cygnus. I appreciate it. So PraiseIAm. Thanks for being here, my good man. Brief introduction.
Oh, yeah. So my channel is PraiseIAm now. It used to be PraiseIAm that I am because I was taken down for a macaroni type of recipe commercial type of thing. So I was taking that, but I'm on my new channel now. I've always focused on apologetics, defending the Christian faith, and I mean that's what I focus on. I have good fellowship every night. Come to my channel, check it out. I'm absolutely looking forward to this debate. My interlocutor Cygnus, and it should be a good one.
Awesome. Well, great introductions from the both of you. Already, we've got a great chat. Super sticker from Raymond. Thanks so much for the super sticker. Once again, tag me with your questions at Standing for Truth. Then I won't miss them. These discussions and debates typically get pretty lively. That being said, let's go over the format for the evening. Okay, so it's going to be a laid back debate. We're going to be starting off with between 10 and 15 minute opening statements. Cygnus is going to start, followed by PraiseIAm, and then we are going to jump right into a cordial, respectful, open dialogue. We're going to keep it equally timed and yet free-flowing. Then we'll probably wrap it up with some concluding statements and an audience Q&A. So that being said, why don't we hand it over to Cygnus? And I know I am going to be helping you out with your slides here, so we can get that going first before we start your timer.
Well, just get ready. I'm just going to give a little quick intro to what I want to accomplish here today, and then you can bring up the first slide. Okay?
Okay. Go ahead. Take your time.
So it came about that I was going to do a debate against Bill Morgan on SFT's channel. We had a couple of email discussions, and immediately he's asking me if I want to debate some other people. And we're talking about topics. And one of the topics he brings up is biblical slavery, which is an interest of mine because I'm interested in issues of human rights and civil rights. But my immediate reaction was, oh, really? I mean, hasn't biblical slavery been done to death? I mean, isn't the internet just filled with those who are like arguing that it was not immoral, arguing that it was immoral, debates between the two, etc. So do we really want to do this again? And I had to think, like, if I'm going to do a debate, I want to do something a little bit different than it's done time after time after time. So I listened to a bunch of debates online, including a couple by PraiseIAm. Kind of had an idea of what I wanted to do. I am not an expert. Okay, I'm not an expert in biblical studies. I'm not an expert in biblical history or anything like that. What I find is when experts start like getting into these debates, and I love them for it. Okay, they are so enthused about their field that they are very happy to get down into the absolute weeds and the nitty gritty about details. What I want to try to do is just focus on one thing in particular. Okay, not explore all the nuances of like different scenarios. One thing in particular. I don't want to get into a situation where we have dueling citations. My expert says this, my expert says that. Even when I'm listening to these people, I much prefer hearing them actually explain things than saying, hey, here's somebody else who agrees with me. My eyes tend to glaze over when that starts happening. I don't want to argue about the definition of slavery. I don't want to argue about whether, are prisoners slaves, are workers slaves, employees slaves, etc. I don't want to argue about like, well, what about the women who were kept for a life or anything? Was that slavery? Was that not slavery? I'm going to provide a definition of slavery, and then we can discuss whether the biblical servitude meets that definition. If it does, but you still feel that that definition does not qualify as slavery, then our disagreement is only one of definition. We can agree that the biblical slavery or servitude does meet the qualifications that I set out to demonstrate. And as such, because I don't want to be getting down in the nitty gritty, I'm only going to focus on a few points and a few verses, ones I'm sure PraiseIAm is already familiar with. So I'm not going to present a challenge to him by saying, hey, what about this obscure verse that you might not have memorized before? Now, in order to prove that the Bible condones, let's go to the first slide. There we go. Waiting for you. SFT, you got the first slide? Here we go.
Let me just unmute myself, Cygnus, so that say anything. So yeah, you're good. Looks good.
I see it. Can you bring up like full screen or anything for my wonderful graphics? Yeah.
Yes.
All right. That's good.
Here we
That's pretty good.
from beginning. There we go.
You get it. That's great. So, okay. So I like doing an Oxford style debate rather than like just a discussion between two people like this view versus that view. Because you either prove your point or you don't. And the Oxford style debates don't tend to wander as much. So the resolution that I'm putting forward is that the Bible condones chattel slavery. And I define that as the act of owning another person as property. Okay, that is actually all that is required for chattel slavery, if you own another person as property. But I'm going to go a little farther than that, because the real key here is like the morality of it. So I'm going to like say that the Bible condones chattel slavery just as bad or as worse as was the case in the antebellum South. In order to prove that let's see, so those qualities include slaves could be bought, sold, and separated from their families. They could be passed on as inheritance because they were property, and they were subject to abuse. They could be beaten, killed, raped, and that they could be kept for life. Now, even in the antebellum South, the slaves had some technical legal protections, okay, but those were seldom enforced. In order to prove that that the Bible condones chattel slavery, I only need to prove that at least one class of individuals were subject to biblically approved chattel slavery. In order to disprove, I think, and I hate it when people say this is what my opponent has to do, okay? But I think that PraiseIAm is that it's not enough for him to argue that slaves were not chattel slaves, that some other verse in the Bible says that slaves were not chattel slaves, if the verses I cite do show that. So if he comes up with some verse that says, oh, you may not keep slaves, all that establishes is a contradiction. If I establish that you can keep slaves that meet these qualifications, then I've reached my point, even if some other part of the Bible says, oh, maybe you shouldn't do that. So let me go on to, you can go on to the next slide. Next slide, SFT.
It should. Is it not? Is it changing for you?
It did. Yeah. It took a moment. So the first issue that we need to talk about is, did the same laws apply to everybody in the Bible? Okay. And particularly in the Old Testament. I'm not really going to be talking about the New Testament. I'm talking about the Old Testament. And there were different laws for foreigners as to Hebrews. So that was one way that classes could be differentiated. Deuteronomy 15 says that a Hebrew slave or a Hebrew servant can only serve to 6 years, and then 7th year had to go free. Leviticus 25 says that foreign slaves could be kept for life. So there were some differences between the laws that differentiated between Hebrew slaves and non-Hebrew slaves. Next slide, please.
You're good.
That's weird. It's not updating right away. There we go. Okay. Looks like there's a bit of a delay. So the next question is, did the same laws apply to women as to men? And the answer to that is no. And not surprisingly, given the society. Exodus 21 illustrates this. If a man sells his daughter to be a maidservant, she shall not go out as the men servants do. So there were at least one and maybe more differences between the way women were treated and the way men were treated and laws that applied to them. Next slide, please. You got it?
You're good. You're good.
Okay. So the next one I want to issue is, did the same laws apply to slaves as to free men? And the answer to that is also obviously no. And there's an example of that. We can see in Exodus 21. Verse 12 says, he that smiteth a man so that he die shall surely be put to death. That's it. If you smite a man and he dies, he's put to death. No other qualifications on that. And that's what the law that applied to the free men. But to slaves, if a man smite his servant or his maid with a rod, and he die under his hand, he shall surely be punished. Notwithstanding, if he continue a day or two, he shall not be punished, for he is his money. So there were they did make a distinction between crimes against free men and crimes against slaves. Next slide.
You're good. And I did just check, Cygnus. Looks like there's about a 4-second delay, so it's not just you, but you're good now.
So because of this, because that there are different classes of people in the Old Testament, when we see a passage that applies a law or a stricture or restriction or rights to a group of people, we have to decide who that is actually applying to. We have to interpret what we're reading. And we're going to say there are two ways we can do interpretation. We can use what's called exegesis or hermeneutics, and the distinction between them is fairly nebulous. And using this method, the interpreter is supposed to be led to his conclusions by following the text. What does it say? If there's ambiguity, if it says something outright, you should take it at its word. If there's ambiguity, you can look for it and see, okay, well, what kind of context should this be interpreted? That's fine. The other way is eisegesis, which is the opposite of exegesis. And sometimes we see it called, referred to as harmonizing. And in harmonizing, you have this ideal interpretation that you want to be true. And you will add to the text or interpret things in such a way as to achieve that goal. The interpreter injects his own ideas into the text to make it mean whatever he wants. That is what we don't want to do. So we need some rules and principles to follow. Next slide.
You're good.
Okay. So these are the principles of textual interpretation that I'm going to follow when we look at the verses I'm going to present. Number one, more specific passages take precedence over less specific passages. For instance, if you have a passage that says, the same law shall apply to all, but you have another passage that says, those of crimson hair shall not enter the temple of the Lord. Well, then the first passage cannot be used to argue that people with red hair were allowed to enter the temple of the Lord, because the second passage is more specific. It provides an exception to what is the more general case in the first passage. Second rule is we're going to interpret in the manner which minimizes contradictions. Okay, so if we don't want to interpret in a manner that is designed to put the Bible in the best light or the worst light. We should come at it from a neutral perspective. Okay, and I know this is difficult for Christians to do because you begin with the presumption that is the perfect Word of God. But in strict textual interpretation, that would be eisegesis, not exegesis. Exegesis looks at the text. Number three, if a passage applies to members of a specific group, the complement or the opposite applies for members not of that group. So, for instance, if a passage says, for instance, slaves must not wear clothing that is green, okay, we can infer that non-slaves could wear clothing that is green, else there would be no need for that exception. Number four, if two passages contradict one another, we just have to acknowledge that contradiction. So, for instance, Exodus 21 says, and if a man sell his daughter to be a maidservant, she shall not go out as the men servants do. She shall not go free. But Deuteronomy 15 says that if thy brother, a Hebrew man or a Hebrew woman, be sold unto thee and serve thee 6 years, then in the 7th year thou shalt let him go free from thee. And if it shall be, he shall say to you, I will not go from thee, because I loveth thee and thine house, because he is well with thee. Then thou shalt take an awl and thrust it through his ear unto the door, and he shall be thy servant forever. And also unto thy maidservant thou shalt do likewise. So Exodus 21:7 is saying the maidservant shall go free. But in Exodus 17, the maidservant does not go free. We just have to acknowledge that there's a contradiction there. So as an example, next slide, please.
You're good.
Okay, so as an example of this, we have Leviticus 25. And ye shall hallow the 50th year and proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto the inhabitants thereof, and it shall be jubilee unto you. And ye shall return every man unto his possession, and shall return every man unto his family. So does that mean that every man goes free? Well, the problem is, if you look a little farther in Leviticus, you go down 25, 44, 45, 46, where it says, and ye shall take them, these foreign slaves, as an inheritance, blah, blah, blah. And you may inherit them as possession, and they shall be your bondsmen forever. Well, that's not compatible with the first one. But if we put this grid down here, between men, women versus Hebrews, foreigners, you can see the first one clearly falls under the men in Hebrew. It clearly applies to men, male Hebrews. Not sure if it applies to women or not, so I left that one blank. It may or may not. But the foreigners are an exception, and that takes precedence. So they are not to go free. Next slide, please. And SFT, I see I've only got a minute left. I wonder if we could extend that 5 more minutes if Praise is okay with that.
Absolutely, man. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, since I didn't have to practice this beforehand. So,
and then I was just going to point out, Cygnus, I paused it during the times we were kind of lagging and stuff. So yeah, you've got about 5 minutes anyway. So you're good. Okay. Yeah, 5 more minutes.
Okay. So so if we put these two factors together as a grid and we look at all the ways that they combine, we come up with 9 different possible combinations for how a particular verse referring to a group of people could be interpreted. So that kind of gives us a bit of an understanding of like the problems that we could face in this. Next slide.
You're good.
So what I've done is gone through and I've found verses in the Bible that pertain to slavery, and I've tried to put them in this grid where across the top I have Hebrew men, Hebrew women, and foreigners. I should have said foreign slaves. That should say foreign slaves. My bad, because foreigners were not necessarily subject to these foreign strangers were not necessarily subject to these prescriptions. And I really didn't see a difference in the way that men and male and female foreign slaves were treated, so I put them in their own category. And down the left-hand side, I put some of the moral issues that we want to talk about, but how long they could be kept, could they be bought, sold, separated, could they be kidnapped, because I've seen that come up in a lot of debates, can they be enslaved through capture, and what kind of protections did they have from abuse. But we may refer back to this, okay, but because we're only talking about were some people considered chattel slaves, we only really need to address these boxes in the red here, because these are the things that would qualify as chattel slavery and would qualify as abuse, not having protections from abuse. Next slide. And then we get into my nitty gritty.
All good.
All righty. So you can drink here. Could slaves be bought, sold, kept for life, passed on as inheritance, and born into slavery? And again, we're only talking about foreign slaves here. So verse 44 of, I think that's Leviticus. I forgot to put down there. I think it's Leviticus. Yeah, I think it's Leviticus. It says, both thy bondmen and thy bondmaids, which thou shalt have, shall be of the heathen that are around you. Of them ye shall buy bondmen and bondmaids. So that shows that they could be bought, they could be sold, they could be separated from their families. Moreover, of the children of the strangers that do sojourn with you, of them ye shall buy, and all of their families that are with you, which they begat in your land, and they shall be your possession. So right now we've established a class of slavery which is separate from Hebrew slaves. These are foreign slaves purchased from foreigners or from foreigners living in the region. It says, and ye shall take them as an inheritance for your children after you, to inherit them for possession. They shall be your bondmen forever. But over your brethren, the children of Israel, you shall not rule one over another with rigor. So that establishes that they could be kept for life. Next slide.
All good.
This is the more challenging one. Could they be subject to abuse? So Exodus 21 provides minimal legal protections for Hebrews. It says, if you smite your servant and he dies, then you're going to be punished. If he dies immediately. But if he lives for a day or two, then the master will not be punished, for he is his money, for the slave is his property. It belongs to him. So that's some protections for Hebrew slaves. Hebrew slaves or servants. Then it goes on and says in verse 26, and if a man smite the eye of his servant or the eye of the maid, that it perish, he shall let him go free for his eye's sake. And if he smite out his manservant's tooth or his maidservant's tooth, he shall let him go free for the tooth's sake. So Leviticus 20, so that provides some protections for Hebrew slaves specifically. Leviticus 25 indicates that non-Hebrew slaves were afforded fewer protections than were afforded to the Hebrew slaves. It says, "You shall take them as inheritance for your children. You shall inherit them for possession," which was not the case with Hebrew slaves. "They shall be your bondmen forever," which was not the case with the Hebrew slaves. But it says, "Over your brethren, the children of Israel, you shall not rule over one another with rigor." Well, since this is saying that for the Hebrew slaves, they should not be ruled over with rigor or strictness or severity, the complement of that is that the non-Hebrew slaves could be ruled over with rigor and severity. So we get that from the principle of exception. Furthermore, I am going to argue that the Bible did permit these slaves to be raped. If we look at Deuteronomy 21, it says, "When thou goest forth to war against thine enemies, and the Lord God has given them into thine hands, and thou hast taken them captive, and you see a beautiful woman, and you want to have her for her wife, then you bring her to your house, and she shall shave her head and pare her nails, and then she becomes the wife and the sexual property of the man." Also the case with, go to the next slide, please. So,
You're good.
yeah, this is a little out of place, but this applies as well. And Numbers 31 states that this is how you deal with. This is how they dealt with their captives. They said, "Now therefore kill every male among the little ones, and kill every woman that hath known by man by lying with him. But all the women and children that have not known a man by lying with him," in other words, the virgins, "you keep alive for yourselves." And these women were spoils of war, as Deuteronomy 20 says, "The women and the little ones and the cattle and all that is in the city, and even the spoil thereof, thou shalt take unto thyself. And you shall eat the spoil of thine enemies, which the Lord God hath given thee." So that's all I have. I think that establishes that slaves could be bought, sold, and separated from their families. They could be passed on as inheritance. They could be beaten, killed, raped, and kept for life. And those are all the qualifications for the definition of chattel slavery. And I'll pass it on to Praise.
All right.
Awesome.
Thank you, Cygnus, for that opening statement. And Praise, he went just over 20 minutes, just a little bit, which is fine. Okay. And I think long opening statements, especially on this topic, this important topic, is necessary. So I want to say already to the audience, great chat. We got 60 people right now, and a lot of questions, super chats, super stickers coming in. So thank you so much. Once again, guys, tag me at Standing for Truth just so I don't miss it. And Praise, we're going to throw it over to you. You've got, we're up to 20 minutes. Whatever you don't use, we'll throw into the discussion portion. But go ahead. Take it away. The floor is yours.
Awesome, brother. Appreciate this opportunity to bring the truth out tonight. I hope at least we get this out tonight, that there's going to be two sides, and whatever side prevails, hopefully people see that. So let's get started. So just make sure you can see the screen here, SFT.
Yes. Yeah. You look good. You're all good.
Awesome. Here we go. The Bible condones chattel slavery, true or false? False! Consensus on slavery in the ancient Near East. So the seminar is the Oriental Institute seminar entitled Slaves and Households in the Near East. Here's what they said. At the outset of the seminar, the participants agreed that no essential form of Near Eastern or Oriental slavery exists, nor any such universal definition capable of unifying the disparate and gradational realities of enslaved people in the Near Eastern societies. Here's what they all said. This is something else they added with this in their paper with the consensus. Thus, one result of the Oriental Institute seminar is a consensus that scholars should dispense with the slave-free dichotomy. Perhaps if there is any meaningful dichotomy to society, it involves household affiliation versus no household affiliation. While many non-slave persons could lack a household attachment, slaves are a social group that was always and by definition attached to a household or institution. This is Laurel Culbertson, I'm sorry, Slaves and Households of the Ancient Near East. Before we get started, we must define terms to preempt equivocation and or the very likelihood of talking past each other. My opponent must not only clarify what constitutes chattel slavery, but he also must provide an unambiguous case that qualifies for chattel slavery, not chattel. I don't mean to be pedantic there. But anything that falls short of a criterion provided by a slave historian or expert does not meet the requirements for chattel slavery. Here's the expert's definition. We're going to go with that. This is from the Cambridge World History of Slavery, Volume 1, The Ancient Mediterranean World. Quote, a chattel slave was property. The slave owner's rights over his slave property were total, covering the person as well as the labor of the slave. The slave was kinless, stripped of his or her old social identity in the process of capture, sale, and deracination, and denied to the capacity to forge new bonds of kinship through marriage and alliance. These are three basic components of chattel slavery. This is by Peter Garnsey. He's an expert in this field. So biblical skeptics ineptly conflate indentured servitude with chattel slavery. Just how distorted are their views? History gives us a somber reminder of what real chattel slavery is like.
Number 4. The African Slave Ship. Of all the photos of slavery from the past that will horrify you, this is possibly the worst. Back in slave days, ships went to Africa and they pulled these poor people from their homes to put them on ships and bring them overseas to be slaves. The number of Africans on the ship is heartbreaking. Number 5. U.S. prisoners forced to be slaves. This is a photo of United States prisoners who were captured and forced to be slaves during the war. The Japanese treated these poor people badly until they were either killed or freed. This photo shows you how horrible things were back then. Number 6. Sex slaves training for military duty. There are so many sad things about this picture, it's difficult to know where to begin. The girls in this photo are sex slaves, and they look like they are no older than 15 years old. These girls should be in high school, hanging out with their friends, studying and preparing for college. Instead, they are forced to be sex slaves. The Japanese needed as many soldiers as they could get, so they trained the sex slaves to fight in battle. There aren't too many photos more shocking than this one.
So the practice of chattel slavery was punishable by death. So chattel slavery is impossible because Exodus 21:16 explicitly outlaws all human trafficking. Accomplished PhD Hebrew scholar Douglas Stewart points out the transliteration of the word man, S, with as the S, special S mark there in the syntax, used in this verse indicates all kidnapping without regard to class, gender, status, or age. The verse should be translated, whoever steals a person, whether he sells him or is found in possession of him, must be put to death. This is the source, the New American Commentary, Volume 2, Exodus, Douglas K. Stewart. Trafficking livestock, however, as property in the very next chapter, chapter 22, states the punishment is double recompense, not the death penalty, as recorded in Exodus 21. Hence demonstrating people are not viewed as chattel. Moreover, Baal's owners in the KJV or English translations are chattel owners, not Adon's masters, because Baal's chattels such as an ox would be returned back to their owner as stipulated in Exodus 21:29 or 30 and 34. However, an escaped Eved would not be returned back to their Adon master as written in Deuteronomy 25:15. And here is the Hebrew manuscript. You guys can see it for yourself. Here is the special mark right here in the Hebrew, showing that it is for all sexes, all creeds, all nationalities and races. It applies. You cannot, no human trafficking at all. So equality for aliens disproves Bible condoning chattel slavery. Yahweh desired for Hebrews to love and help aliens as one of their own. Moreover, they were not to treat aliens impartially because they were aliens in Egypt. This is Leviticus 25:35 through 37, Exodus 12:48, Leviticus 19:34 through 35, Deuteronomy 10:18 through 19. Yahweh desired for Hebrews not to enslave aliens because they were also slaves in Egypt. Exodus 22, 21, 23, 9, Leviticus 19, 33 through 34, Leviticus 25, 42, 45, Deuteronomy 24, 14. Yahweh curses those who withhold justice from aliens. Deuteronomy 27, 19. Mistreating aliens was equated with mistreating orphans and widows. Ezekiel 22, verse 7. And lastly, Yahweh equates enslaving aliens with shedding innocent blood and idolatry. Jeremiah 7:6. The spirit of the law eliminates the possibility of condoned chattel slavery. So A&E scholar Driver and Miles explain because none of the statutes in the law collections were cited, legal texts, whether in private legal documents or documents that stem from court documents, they were never intended to be external but internal. Ergo is why the Pentateuch and the Hammurabi are not royal edicts, but they are rather akin to English case law, which presents a rule whose spirit of the law is to be followed, not its latter. For example, Jesus showed the spirit of the law overruled the letter of the law, as exemplified in Matthew chapter 5, when he said, "You have heard, but I say unto you." That's the source is Pamela Barmash, Laws of Hammurabi, pages 10 through 18. To delineate the difference between the spirit of the law in contrast to the letter of the law is crucial because legislating law codes in a legal sense is ridiculous, considering God would have to directly command an innumerable amount of scenarios that would have to be taken into consideration all courts, governments, and public spheres for all time. That's why biblical law codes by the majority of A&E scholars are viewed to be in the descriptive sense as case law, a conditional spectrum, rather than in an apodictic sense, which are absolute, unconditional, like the Ten Commandments. These law codes were never binding beyond a local temple, were never intended otherwise. God expected people to use the commandments as a guide to extrapolate legal principles from. Slavery, rape, murder, etc. are prohibitions that automatically stem from the spirit of the law rather than the letter of the law, thus making it impossible for the Bible to be charged with condoning chattel slavery. The sources Botero, McKinley, Watson, Carmichael, Hillers, Malul, and many more. And this will be the last slide here. Debunking popular chattel slave text. Biblical skeptics go to the notorious Exodus 21, 20 through 21 passage to argue these demonstrably endorse chattel slavery because the master supposedly can beat a slave to an inch of his life. Then verse 4:21 purportedly calls the slave as property. Firstly, scholars point out there is a chiastic structure to Exodus 21, making it thematic. This means the pattern or order states, if not the law of text lenionis, then the death penalty ensues, a reverse order. Since the death penalty already applies in Exodus 21:20, then the law of lex talionis follows. Hence, verses 26 through 27 document an event is released out of their contractual obligations since they didn't die. These chiasms in Exodus 21 alone force the law to be interpreted as a group rather than individually. Moreover, the laws protect the master from the parent loophole from an event making up accusations to get out of their contractual obligation. That is why it takes up 2 to 3 days due to judicial deliberation. And biblical skeptics also like to appeal to Leviticus 25, 44 through 46, which supposedly promotes chattel slavery foreigners because it says they are their property and inheritance forever. However, Ezekiel 44:28 says the same thing about God himself. Quote, the Lord is the achuzah, property, and inheritance of the Israelites forever. If this phraseology denotes something foul like chattel slavery, then biblical skeptics would be saying the Lord is a chattel slave to his own people. What? No scholar has ever suggested such absurdity, and it's actually logically impossible. God is an immaterial being. He is omnipresent. It's even a physical impossibility. Furthermore, Leviticus 25:45 through 46 states that Toshab, a foreigner, will be the acquisite property of Israel and inherited forever. Yet, in the very next verse 47, it says the Toshab not only can wax rich, but they can also be masters of Israelite aveds, thus making it impossible for there to be chattel slavery in these texts. And with that, I'm going to go into the more of a rebuttal here to some of Cygnus's arguments. And he goes, he's not an expert. Yeah, I mean, that's why we have to appeal. We have to use scholarship. We have to appeal to that. The definition of a slave is very important, especially a chattel slave. You have to show that it crosses that. I think I hear some in the background, but yeah, you have to make sure it crosses those lines, which obviously not even close. And kept for life. The word there is olam in the Hebrew. It can mean 10 different things actually in the Hebrew. It can mean a period of time. It could mean at the end of the master's life, which is how Hebrew scholars in Jewish texts actually define the text. I mean, define the word olam forever. So that is an anachronistic fallacy to say that this is some type of ongoing thing perpetually for all time, and in a philosophical sense, you have to be precise with your terminology. And contradiction, how is it you have to show a line of text, a line of argumentation that shows that is a contradiction. I don't even think he even knows what the word contradiction is in a philosophical sense. It requires a tautology. You need a tautology to even appeal to that. So what, as an atheist, what would be his tautology? I don't think there is one, because he would have to be a relativist, a subjectivist, and etc. As far as Leviticus 25:46, I don't think he knows what a foreigner is. I don't even think there really is a foreigner, because in Exodus 12:48, it says a foreigner outside the land can be treated as one of their own and be adopted as one of their own. Exodus 12:48. So, but also, I don't even think Cygnus goes into these words. I'm sure, yes, that's fine if you go into the English, but remember, the speakers of the manuscripts, they didn't write in English. We have to appeal. We have to go to the Hebrew, the Greek, the Syriac, and etc. to get the exact meaning, or to a precise meaning. Maybe not exact, but a precise meaning. And he says, well, the word there, nations, or the heathen, I think he might be using the King James. I'm not sure. He didn't really elucidate that. But the word there is goyim in the Hebrew. Well, in Exodus, several other places, God called the Hebrews, the Israelites, goyim. So does he even have, can he delineate, can he demonstrably show us contextually that the goyim, they are not even their own people? How would we know that? Even if we grant them they are non-Israelites there, that doesn't mean much, because the Toshabs in verse 45 through 46 could wax rich and also partake in indentured servitude legislation. So they were actually masters of Israelite servants. I call them servants. That's the proper terminology. Aveds, that's the word in the Hebrew, aveds. So, and also, I want to talk about Exodus 21:8, where it says that the females do not go out as males. Well, that's because they did housework, maid work. And Abraham himself had female foreign aveds that were not Israelites. And all scholars, I challenge Cygnus to show me how, if they were, in fact, it's the very opposite. The scholars unanimously agree that these foreign eveds, these female foreign eved maidservants, were treated remarkably well. They were treated specially, even beyond what's required. And this is with Hagar. And you can read this in Genesis 15 too, but also Proverbs 27:27 talks about maid work. So that's why female eveds do not go out as male servants, because they're doing housework. They don't do the physical labor like the males do. And that just includes, maybe cleaning, doing work in the fields with some type of food or whatever it is what they were doing back then. It was probably agricultural. Whatever agricultural work was required back then, they did that. The females did more housework. So of course they're not going to go out as male servants do. And here's the paradox for Cygnus. So number one, I'm going to put this in a in like a syllogistic format. So in Exodus 21, it says a Hebrew. Where it's really an avri, and it's called avri in the Hebrew, which is a habaru. It's called a habaru, and now it is a consensus view that the avris are actually habarus, which are Canaanites. They are Egyptians. They are non-Israelites. These are foreigners. And I can give so much citation for that. If you want to give it, I'll give it to you. I'll provide it for you. See, this is why we need to appeal to ancient Near East scholarship, because without that, we're going to be in the dark, left in the dark, left without understanding. So these were Habarus in the ancient Near East, and they were landless. They were also, famined. And what they would do is they would get adopted through a master. And since they had probably debt that was irreconcilable, what they would do is go to a court, and they would get assigned to a master. And when the master died olam, after the master's life, they would receive the master's house and his stuff. So these are the ones that are being talked about in Leviticus 25:44 through 46. And if it's not, then they are Israelites, because already God called the nations goyim to his own people. So, and lastly, I guess how much time do I have here, SFT?
You've got 1 minute and 30 seconds.
And with the supposed foreign slavery with the woman, Cygnus does not know the rules of war. Obviously, either he purposely left them out or he doesn't know them. So we can get into that. I'm looking forward to the discussion. I appreciate the time. With that, I yield.
All right. Well, thank you, PraiseIAm. Thank you, Cygnus. You both went roughly 20 minutes. So great opening statements, great visuals from the both of you. I always appreciate that. To the chat, thank you so much for your questions and super chats coming in. Make sure that you are tagging me, because we got a lot of comments coming through. I don't want to miss your question if you do have one. So that being said, why don't we jump right into the open discussion? As always, here on this channel, we like to keep it professional, cordial, and respectful, of course, and as equally timed as possible. So I think the best way to proceed would be Praise just ended with his 20-minute opening statement and response. So why don't we hand it over to Cygnus to kick us off in the discussion. If Cygnus, you had a couple points you wanted to make, followed by a question, however you want to proceed, we'll allow you to start off with the discussion. Cygnus, you are muted. Just make sure you unmute yourself. And gentlemen, the floor is yours.
Yeah, Cygnus, if you want to pose some type of text, I would love to talk about one of your texts, maybe Deuteronomy, Leviticus, something like that. But I'll let you engage first. You're on mute, Cygnus.
Cygnus, looks like you're still on mute. Actually, is it just me, Praise, or did his screen turn kind of blue?
It might be frozen. Oh, there it is. It's like green. I think I see something back there. Oh, having trouble getting off mute. Okay, so we'll give him some time here.
Cygnus, it does say when I try and get you off mute, it says that you muted yourself. So therefore, I guess whatever button you used the first time, if it's frozen, it does kind of look like you're frozen. You may want to. Yeah, come back. I'm just going to recommend that. Cool. Look, you can come back. And Uke Salad says, looks like you hit the camera button instead of the mute button. And I think that's what he did. So that's fine. Yeah. So guys, thanks for always being lively in the chat until Cygnus comes back in. Should be a minute or so. I'm going to go over a couple of the shows we have coming up, guys. So be here on the 2nd, which is just a couple days from now, for Boy versus Nephilim Free. So that should be fun. Evidence for the Christian God. And here we go. Here's Cygnus. So you're good. You're good. You left us in suspense, Cygnus, but you're back. We can hear you. So go ahead, gentlemen. The floor is yours.
I don't know what was going on with that. None of the buttons at the bottom of my screen.
I hate that.
Any sort of touch. So yeah, I have a couple points to make, or things I'd like to say in response to that. I don't know whether we should take them one at a time and trade back and forth, or whether I should list these and then maybe as kind of a mini rebuttal, and then let PraiseIAm address the specific slides and verses that I cited, and we could discuss those one at a time. How does that fly for you, Praise?
Either way is fine with me, man. What does the mod think? Because I'm gonna let the mod pick on that. I'll just let it to him.
Sure. I think that's a professional way to do it. Why don't we, since Praise, you ended with your 20-minute statement, why don't we let Cygnus kick it off and choose what point he wants to focus on, what scripture, and then we'll go back and forth that way.
Sure.
Go ahead.
So a couple points of debate, points of discussion I wanted to respond to. Praise said that it's a consensus of a seminar that there was no slavery. That's a consensus of one seminar. He made a similar comment when he said that scholars universally agree that female foreign slaves were treated well. I find that difficult to believe with that kind of an absolute statement, that there's universal or even anywhere near universal consensus that female slaves were treated well. He brought up Hagar. Hagar was raped. I don't think that's being treated well. Okay, she was offered as a sexual object to Abraham by Sarah and got pregnant, and she was very angry when she ended up getting pregnant. She did not want to be pregnant, and she ended up leaving. She was a servant. I believe she was a foreign servant. Okay, and she was raped. Secondly, the second issue I have is that he brought up a different definition of slavery, and I'd like to know. I mean, if he thinks that the slavery in the antebellum South qualified as chattel slavery, because one of the things that he quoted an expert as saying is that in chattel slavery, slaves were attached to a household. Well, that was also the case with Southern slaves. And then he says that in the definition that he gave of it had to be property, that slaves were property, and it had to be total slavery. They had to be kinless, denied capacity to forge new bonds of kinship. Well, that may be his definition of slavery, but in the South, that wasn't the case. In the South, they could marry and they could have children and they could form new bonds of kinship. So he's talking about some sort of definition which goes beyond even the horrors of the slavery of the antebellum South. So again, I'm only arguing for my definition. If he wants to agree that, yeah, they could be kept for life, yeah, they could be beaten, yeah, they could be bought and sold, That's fine. He may not consider that slavery, but those are the points I'm trying to get to. I'm trying to get to the actual definitions. Does it meet these definitions? What are the criteria? Because those are the moral issues, not whether you particularly want to consider it slavery or not. He says I conflate chattel slavery, and indentured servitude. Well, the Bible differentiates between chattel slavery and indentured servitude, and that's what I'm doing. He listed a series, we can get into this more when we talk about the actual verses. He listed a series of general verses, like, hey, you should treat all people nicely, as if they negated my specific verses. Hey, you can beat your slave. And again, the general verses don't trump specific verses. Specific verses are exceptions to general verses. The last thing I guess I would mention is, two more things. He said that I need to prove a tautology in order to prove a contradiction. A tautology is the opposite of a contradiction. A tautology is a statement that agrees with itself. So I'm not sure where that came from, whether he needs to look up the definition of a tautology. And lastly, he in Exodus 21 says, where it says that when you buy a Hebrew slave, if I understand that, he's saying that's the Hebrew word habaru, and that it can mean anybody. It could mean foreign slaves. Well, there's a couple problems with that. Okay, first off, if I bring up the concordance at Bible Hub, I think they use Strong's concordance. I'm not sure. Okay, and I see all the references to that word in the Bible, and I'm looking at Hebrew translations and 3 different biblical translations into English. Every single one of them and all 5 of these references is translated as a Hebrew. Secondly, if it applied to foreign slaves, if they're talking about foreign slaves, okay, then why would you even need to specify it? Why would you need to say why wouldn't it not just say, hey, if you buy a slave, these are the rules? So those are my responses to him. And then he can respond to that if he wants. I'd be curious if he disagrees with any of the criteria that I listed in my opening for interpreting text. Because if we can't agree on the criteria, that's going to be an issue. And then after that, I think I'm ready to go on to the specific verses I cited and what his refutations are to those, or what his rebuttals are. That's it.
Go ahead, Praise. The floor is yours.
So, first I want to tackle the Hagar, his interpretation of Abraham with giving him a maid in Genesis. I find that in Genesis 16, I find that laughable for a number of reasons. Number one, there is no verb attached to any type of rape to signify rape. So that's just it's just a claim that's unfounded. It's an unfounded claim. There's no justification for that. That might be based off prejudice or bias. I just think that you need to give them a little bit more effort with that, Cygnus. I just think you can't just inject what you think's happening in the text. And I see atheists do that. And
can I respond to that, or do we want to take these one at a time, or do you want to?
Yeah, this is my response, and then we'll get into the open discussion.
Okay.
Well, furthermore, I wish Cygnus would get familiar with a little bit of the grammar in the Hebrew too, and the protisis and the apotesis, and those 2 grammatical constructs. It shows that there's a condition, or hypothetically, it's if or may. That's what it shows in the text. And in all these texts we see in the Pentateuch, except for the 10 Commandments, are in a conditional sense. They can go non-legislative, and I wish Cygnus would approach this more from a scholarly viewpoint, because it's making him look foolish. And the fact that only the Pentateuch really is legislative or apodictic, which we mean unconditional, is that we're not supposed to look at these texts in a literal or strict sense. These are not literal and we're not supposed to do that. We're supposed to look at these more in the didactic sense. And the reason why the reason I think about this, that there's a million different circumstances that could happen throughout the ancient Near East. There's so many different hypotheticals out there. God would literally have to give Moses millions upon millions upon millions of commands of those hypothetical instances. So it doesn't work like that. See, God works with reality. So we call this casuistic law. So casuistic law was formed to let the judicial system work with law precedents. These are case laws. So these are things that that atheists don't think about when they come to the Hebrew text and the Old Testament. But yeah, absolutely, there's no verb attached to any rape here in Genesis 16. I thought that was ridiculous. Also, a tautology to me is absolute epistemology. You need an absolute epistemology if you're going to claim that there is a contradiction. A contradiction necessitates an absolute epistemology. As an atheist, there is no absolute epistemology in the first place. So that negates you from making a claim about a contradiction, unless you want to use it in the colloquial sense. Well, I just think it means it doesn't make sense to me. Okay, that's fine if it doesn't make sense to you. That could be it's a incredulity. It's a claim from incredulity. But also in Exodus 21, obviously all you got to do is go down to verse 26 and 27. There's safeguards there. Even if you knock a tooth out or an eye, they're released out of their contractual obligations. So where do you get off of it's like a heyday to beat people and things? That's absolutely not true, because there's safeguards already put there. And plus, these are casuistic laws. They don't go, you can't just cherry pick one verse and claim, and then just neglect the other 5 passages that go in the casuistic format. So again, I just think a lot of these claims of chattel slavery derive from just a lack of understanding, ignorance, maybe a little bit of the Dunning-Kruger syndrome. I don't mean to, that's not in a ad hominem sense. That's just, telling you what was really going on there. So I really recommend Cygnus get into more of the scholarship before you just throw out and regurgitate a bunch of claims that you've probably seen from atheist websites. But I'm going to end it there. We can go into the open discussion now.
Well, you can insult my lack of scholarship if you want, but that really means nothing unless you actually can debunk my claims and support your own. Regarding Hagar was a servant of Sarah and Abraham, right? She was under their authority, right?
Yeah, she was an Amah.
Okay, and she did have, and Sarah did offer her to Abraham to have sex with, right?
She consented. Yes, there was consent.
Where did it say that she consented? Where did it say that she consented?
Well, again, so this is what I was bringing up: the protasis and also the apodosis. Some of these are hard to say, but it's apodosis or the protasis. You have to get familiar with that.
That's nice. Where does it say that she consented? What verse?
Again, the protasis and the apodosis, that says that the grammatical construct shows contingency there. So
that means nothing. You don't have a verse that says that. You don't have a verse that says she consented.
So what? It's in the grammatical construct alone.
Okay, demonstrate that.
Sure. It's okay. So we talk about the apodosis and the protasis. We're talking about a sentence that has a condition or it's a hypothetical, usually if or may. We see this in Genesis 16. So it may be that I obtain children. We see there's a protasis there. There's mays.
That's about whether or not he has children or not. That's not about whether or not he has sex with her. Maybe they may have obtained children by her.
Sure, but that's what we're talking about, right? We're talking about.
No. She doesn't say that about. She says, Sarah says, "I pray thee, go in unto my maid and it may be that you may obtain children by her. Okay?
May. Did you see the word mays there? Yes.
Yeah, that's for whether she actually gets pregnant or not. There's no such qualification for "I pray thee go unto my maid." It's like she doesn't say, "Hey, I pray thee go talk with my maid, and if she wants to have sex, you may have sex." So the may here only applies to whether she gets pregnant or not.
Well, it doesn't even matter because, again, the Pentateuch, there's only one set of scriptures that are absolute or unconditional. That's the Ten Commandments.
Well, this is just an example. You brought up Hagar as an example and your claim was that all scholars agree that female slaves were treated well. And in this case,
yeah,
Hagar is
it is the universal. Yes.
No, it is not. It is not.
Yes, it is. I'll even give you a quote. You want me to give you a quote on that?
I don't want a quote from one person. I want you to prove that there's nobody who doesn't think that.
See, this is the lack of understanding. This is your lack of understanding is the problem. That's the problem with using a universal. If you'd said, a lot of scholars agree with this, or maybe even most, that would have been fine. But when you say universal, it is universal.
It's
universal that Abraham treated his foreign eved graciously. It is universally true. I'm sorry.
Where does it say that?
That is the case.
It doesn't say it.
I was going to give you a quote, but you didn't want the quote.
No, I want the verse.
Well, no, you need to show there's a verb denoting rape in the first place. That's your imagination. The text doesn't care about your imagination into the text. Is a guard in a prison allowed to have sex with one of the prisoners? No. Where does it say that?
Because no, I'm just talking, but this is just an example in our laws, okay? Because we do not consider a slave, okay, to be even able to freely consent. When somebody is living in someone's household and under their authority, they cannot legally consent.
Now you're just showing your ignorance. This is the problem. You're injecting your modern understanding of reality and injecting it and judging in that criteria. You're judging that ancient culture by your modern understanding of reality. That's a presentist fallacy. That is fallacious reasoning.
I don't care whether they thought it was moral back then. I don't care about that. So you're saying if me saying, hey, having sex with a slave is wrong, okay, is my presentist, well then guilty.
If you go back to the opening of my presentation, it talked about consent. It talked about that is the universal, that is the consensus of that. You don't even have a consensus, by the way. I brought one.
There's no consent applied. There's no consent implied in Genesis 16. It is not at all implied that there was consent.
Again,
and once again, whoa. Once again, and she gets angry afterwards when she finds out that she's pregnant.
Where does it say that? What verse?
And it says, and he went unto Hagar, this is verse 4, and she conceived. And when she saw that she had conceived, her mistress was despised in her eyes. She was angry at Sarah for giving her to Abraham as a sex object. She did not want to be pregnant. And then she runs away. After, I believe, Sarah beats her. Abraham says to Sarah, behold, thy maid is in thy hand, do to her as it pleaseth thee. And when Sarah dealt hardly with her, she fled from her face. So
no, it's just jealousy. Go to the very next verse. I was despised in her eyes. It's about jealousy. I could care less about jealousy. That has nothing to do with consent or any type of what you're claiming. It has nothing to do with it. And please give a verb that denotes some type of rape in these texts. There's nothing there insinuated of rape at all.
It says her mistress was despised in her eyes. This is about Hagar. Hagar's mistress was despised in Hagar's eyes.
Yeah.
Right. So Hagar was
jealous. We're talking about jealousy. It has nothing to do with what you're talking about.
Hagar was jealous of Sarah?
Yeah.
What would that have to do with whether she got pregnant or not? Now, it doesn't say that.
But
you are engaging eisegesis, not exegesis.
No, you are. No, I just showed that she was despised in her eyes. This is what we call
right, but
being
you're throwing in this extra thing. You're throwing in this extra thing about jealousy. Jealousy is not mentioned in this. What you are doing is you are adding to the text.
Even if I grant you that, it doesn't say what you say either. So why don't you hold to your own criterion?
I am holding to my own criteria. My criteria does not add to it.
No, you're not. You're eisegeting. You're eisegeting it. You're claiming something's foul here. What is foul about these texts? Name something foul.
We can decide whether this was consensual or not. And I've given several reasons why it was not consensual. Well, first, she was unable to
the grammar necessitates this alone.
Second, she was angry when she conceived.
Right, and I gave a reason why.
And secondly, there's nothing in there that says Sarah. It says Sarah took Hagar, her maid, and gave her to her husband Abraham. There is nothing in there about consent, and you are adding in the consent.
Well, it's the same thing. The word "take" has been used several times in the Old Testament for marriage. The word "take" for marriage. Take for marriage. See, that's another eisegesis by you straw man argument. You are purposely misrepresenting the text. The word "take" there is used for "take to marry." Yes, it is. Exodus 20. Read it for yourself. Exodus 22:16 says you have to get married before you have sex, or if you do have sex, you have to have marriage.
Genesis
but I'm giving you a law. I'm giving you a law. I'm stipulating a law that was applicable to every Hebrew in that time. So every Hebrew.
The story in Genesis precedes those laws, and Genesis 16 says nothing about that.
How so?
Doesn't it come historically before?
I don't know. If you can maybe look the scholarship, this is why we need scholarship. So if you can give some type of citation for that, that'd be awesome.
Well, Abraham lived before.
Well, Job
Moses.
was actually written before that, so maybe your chronology is wrong. If Job was written, actually, scholars say Job was written before. Genesis,
Job is one of the oldest. Job is probably the oldest story. Okay, but if you're talking about the Mosaic laws, or the Deuteronomic laws, or the Levitican laws, okay. Those came after Genesis, because we're talking about Abraham, who's the progenitor.
The formation of the Pentateuch, I don't know. There's different viewpoints on the JEPD hypothesis. There's different things going on out there. So no, that's false. Well, I'm sorry.
What we have here,
you need to get yourself immersed into scholarship before you make these claims.
Yeah, I'm really not buying all the you don't have the scholarship stuff. When I actually point to a verse, you cannot justify. You start adding things to it. You start saying, "Oh, well, she was, she was despised. She despised her mistress because she was jealous of her mistress."
Well, no, the Protestants.
Matter of fact, she runs away later. She's jealous of her mistress. Why does she run away? Why does she run away from Megan?
So the Protestants and Protestants show that grammatically anyway. So I mean, I destroyed that point. It's irrelevant because
you made a claim.
You need to know what Protestant is. You need to know what that is.
I need to know the words you can't even pronounce. Not that I can pronounce them either. Okay, but
Protestants. I just pronounced it Protestants.
These are excuses. Okay, and this is trying to interpret the text in the way that makes it.
No. See, no. What you're doing is giving your imagination. All you're doing is just voicing your biases and your distortions of the text. Okay. No, I'm holding your feet to the fire.
We have a disagreement here, okay? But in order to resolve this,
I can provide a citation by scholars. Right. So
I don't care.
Okay, you don't care. Okay.
So here's the deal. I've supported my case. The evidence I have provided is all from the text. Okay.
No, you haven't. So I called it out. I called your interpretation of the text out. Absolutely not. Not even close.
I'm just
going to jump in here real quick, gentlemen, because it looks like it's been very engaging, very respectful for the most part. A little bit. Looked like I froze there for a second. A little bit of interrupting there. So why don't we? On this, I'm not saying from anyone specific. You guys are both passionate on this topic,
I get you. Yeah.
Maybe on this specific topic, if you guys wanted to make a minute or two of uninterrupted points, it looks like praise, and so we can throw it to Cygnus, and then you can continue down this road if you'd like, or because I know there's a lot of other verses too you guys wanted to talk about. But why don't we kind of regroup? gather our thoughts and do
Sure.
that. Just a couple minutes of uninterrupted point making. Cygnus, go ahead. I'll give you the floor.
Yeah, give me 1 minute on this, and then I'll let Praise have the last word. Okay.
Perfect. Gentlemen.
The only point of contention here, the thing we're trying to decide is, was the sex consensual? Because it doesn't explicitly say that it was consensual or non-consensual. So we're trying to decide that. Everything I have argued is from the text. Okay. I said these things are not compatible with it being consensual. The fact that she was a servant, okay, of a master is not compatible with it being consensual. Okay. The fact that she is never asked to consent or mentions consent is not compatible with it being consensual. The fact that she is angry afterwards is not compatible with it being consensual. So the things I have argued, the arguments I brought are all from the text. But the arguments that Praise has brought up is, oh, you just don't under the scholarship. And the grammar, for some reason, the grammar indicates that it was consensual. I don't get that at all. So I'll just leave it at that. I argued from the text.
Awesome. I appreciate that response, Cygnus. Praise, let's throw it over to you for an equally timed response, roughly a minute. And then, of course, since we keep this free-flowing and organic, you guys can continue down this road, or maybe there's another verse or another point you guys wanted to discuss as well. So that being said, Praise, go ahead.
So the whole contention with his whole argument that females slaves were mistreated. I shot that claim down with Hagar, and then he tried to invoke some type of slavery there. Even though it's not there, he didn't even give a verb. There is no verb at all where it shows that she was seized or overpowered, like Deuteronomy 22:25, where it actually, there's a verb there that actually says forced against or something like that. There is no verb there used like that. And they use it, the Hebrew scriptures put it in there explicitly. They put that in there if there was rape. And so Cygnus has no justification. I shot another claim down. The word take there is actually mean take for marriage. And then when I showed him that, then he tried to descend into a bunch of other useless. He went down a rabbit trail with these just conjecture, just a bunch of conjecture. But I mean, I appreciate the challenge, but I don't. This is pathetic. So I'm gonna end it there. I'll yield my time.
Okay, and thanks to the both of you. I've been very engaging. The chat's loving it. This is a great debate so far. Let's hand it back to Cygnus, and we can convert back to more of a dialogue mode. That being said, Cygnus, if you wanted to respond to that or bring up another verse that you had in mind or another specific topic, I'm going to leave it in your hands, gentlemen, from here on out.
Well,
so go ahead, Cygnus.
The only response I'd make to that is that rape does not need to be violent. It just needs to be non-consensual. So the fact that it says that she was not forced violently doesn't mean anything. The question is whether she can consent.
So if you read Genesis, okay, you want to do your? You're gonna have like a 5-minute period or a minute or what? How are we doing this, SFT?
Well,
I'd like to. Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, you guys kind of just did. You guys just had a couple minutes there of uninterrupted thoughts. So I was thinking we can hand it back to Cygnus and kind of go back into more of a free-flowing dialogue. If it gets a little bit out of hand, then I'll jump in and give you guys some more equally timed rebuttals. So, yeah, however you guys want to proceed. I think Cygnus was finishing a thought. And then we'll go from there.
I think it's really important that we talk about Exodus 21:1, okay, about whether or not it applies to Hebrews, or whether the word that is translated, on BibleGateway.com, okay, by their concordance, every single time as Hebrew means something other than Hebrew. Can you provide some justification for disagreeing with all these experts?
Sure, the word Hebrew is used many. Am I mute? Okay, never mind.
No, you're good. I was just going to say, go ahead.
Okay. The word avri there, and several times throughout the Pentateuch, is used in a non-Israelite. It's used as non-Israelites. So yes, we do have a justification for that.
Okay, but when I'm looking at this concordance, every single instance it's used as Hebrew. It means Hebrew in this concordance.
But no, it's okay. So I disagree there. You need to know the context. So the context used
Well,
there for that's how we decide what a foreigner, okay, Israelite and a non-Israelite is.
well,
So
I have
go
5
ahead.
different verses here from 3 different books, from Genesis, Exodus, and Jonah, and I have 3 different translations of each single one of each of them, and they all consistently translate as being a Hebrew. And
Yeah,
what would be the reason?
you know
What
what
would
that
be the
means. You know
reason
what
to
that
specify?
entails.
Do you think those laws applied only to non-Hebrews?
But okay, so
Did
for
those laws
instance,
apply to?
what? There's only
Is
one. Okay, hold on. Let me respond to you really quick.
okay.
So
Go ahead.
number one, there was. It says in Exodus 12, between 26 and 48, that there was one. There were the Israelites and the non-Israelites were under one law. So we have to get that established first. There wasn't 2 separate laws. The Bible says there's
Okay.
one law. So do you
Okay.
understand that at least?
No, because I showed at the very beginning that there were 2 different laws. That non-foreigners had different. There were different laws that applied to them, and that specific verse would trump yours. Now, your verse applies to like free foreigners traveling through. Okay, that maybe they didn't have to. Maybe they were afforded protections, which makes sense because the Middle East was an economic hub, and you don't want to like screw your economy and screw your trade by having like rogue Hebrews going around kidnapping people. So yeah, it makes sense
So
that they would be treated with respect. But that does not trump the fact that other laws say that they are treated differently.
do you know what the word Hebrew stems from?
It means wanderer, right?
No.
The
It
Habaru. The
comes
Habaru.
Well, yeah, but I'm talking about the basic meaning,
Okay.
the origin of the definition of Hebrew. It comes from the word Eber, and it means to cross the river. Now, tell me,
Okay.
how many different people cross the river? Are you just saying only
Well,
Israelites cross the river? Are you going to claim that, or
that's a genetic fallacy.
really? How so?
Because you're saying because the origin of the word has this root, okay, that is what it means. But that's just the root of the word. The Hebrews were seen as an independent people. They referred to themselves, and again, I'm looking at a concordance here. I've got 5 references to that word in the Bible, in the Old Testament, and 3 different translations of each one. Every single one of them say Hebrew. So if you're going to say,
That's
if you're going
fine, but you
to,
don't.
and again, it makes no sense that they would even include an adjective there if it applied to foreign slaves and Hebrew slaves. So verse 1, is it saying it applies only to Hebrews, only to foreigners, or to both foreign and Hebrew slaves? Which one? Which of
So
those?
they're under one law. So I cited that for you in Exodus 12.
But again,
So that seems
I've shown that
confusing for
that's not
you.
the case. I've shown that that's
No,
not
you
the case
haven't.
because
What have you shown?
I have specific verses saying the opposite.
What?
Yeah, I have
Show me.
specific
Like,
verses
what are you
saying
talking
there are
about?
specific verses saying that if you buy a foreign slave, you can keep him for life. Okay, but if you buy a Hebrew slave, they're to be let go after 6 years, and let go in
So
the 7th year. That is a difference.
tell me what a foreigner is. Can you define a foreigner for me?
Non-Hebrew,
What's a Hebrew?
members of the Israelite tribes.
And what does that mean? So are you making a racial distinction? Are you saying race has something to do with this?
It was certainly a cultural and religious distinction. Do you think that the Israelites do not distinguish?
Exodus 12:48 makes no distinction. It says that you're under one law, but I'm going to finish what I have to say. It also says that you may be as one of us. It means that they're adopted as one of themselves. So no, there is no distinction. I'm sorry. Exodus 12:48. Read it for yourself.
So Exodus 12:48.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's bring it up. At the gateway. Exodus 12. And verse 48?
Yes.
Okay. So 48 says, and when a stranger shall sojourn with thee and will keep the Passover to the Lord, let all his males be circumcised, and let him come near and keep it. And he shall be one that is born in the land, for no uncircumcised person shall eat thereof. That doesn't say what you said it did.
Yes, it does.
It
says that they shall be. Go ahead.
It says only that they're allowed to eat with them if they're circumcised. And in fact, it says in verse 45, 44 and 45, a foreigner and a hired servant shall not eat thereof. So that does not
that's
say
the distinction. That gives
in
you
no
the distinction.
In no way does that
prove
say
my
that
point. You just proved my point. Okay, go ahead. I'll let you finish.
In no way does that say that all foreigners are treated the same, are under the same laws. It doesn't. All it says is that they may eat at the same table if they are circumcised.
Are you done?
That's it. And you've taken that one verse, okay? You've taken that one verse that says, like in this one instance, hey, you can share a table with them, but they have to be circumcised first. And from that, you get, there were no legal differences. From that, you get no legal differences between foreigners and Hebrews. That's absurd.
Okay, so are you done?
Let me jump in real quick. I'm just gonna jump in real quick. So Cygnus, whenever you're done making that point,
I'm done.
Take your time, interrupt it. Okay. And then Praise, you take as much as you need to respond, and we'll kind of go back and forth that way. Go ahead, Praise.
So the distinction there is religious customs, and one of those religious customs that signifies that that you were serious or dedicated to becoming an Israelite was circumcision. So it wasn't race. It has nothing to do with your land, whatever land you're from. It has to do with your beliefs. It's the same thing today. That the distinction today between a Christian and a non-Christian is your beliefs and your religious practices. That determines what a true Israelite was back then, and it's the same for today. There was no skin color. It's not about ethnicity or any of that stuff. So you just proved my point. And God even still allowed uncircumcised people to partake in these type of rituals that were going on back then in the covenant. So God even extended way beyond what is even necessary. So, yep, I think you proved my point. Thank you. So I'll yield there.
So,
okay, I'm going to jump in real quick. And then, Cygnus, take as much time as you need, uninterrupted to respond. Go ahead.
This verse is about whether they can partake in the Passover meal specifically, okay? And it says, yes, they can, but only if they've been circumcised. That's what the verse says. From this verse, PraiseIAm draws the conclusion, there were no legal differences at all between Hebrews and foreigners. I submit to you, PraiseIAm is engaging in eisegesis, not exegesis. He has something that he wants it to say, and he is going to craft it in such a way so that it says it. And I also have to say that this is such a misrepresentation of what the verse says. I have to say this questions your credibility. In no way does it say that there are no legal distinctions between foreigners and Hebrews, and I've cited verses that show that there were. And I'm done on that.
Okay, go ahead, Praise. Take as much time as you need.
So Cygnus is confused here. He doesn't understand there's no legal distinction between a foreigner, someone that is a non-Yahwist. That's the distinction, is a Yahwist and a non-Yahwist. I can give citation from scholars if we want it to even prove that. But then he's conflating that with rituals. Rituals are not a legal distinction. That doesn't qualify as being legal. These things have to do with the Levite ceremonies. So a Levitical ceremony has nothing to do with, again, the statutes and laws, or we call them laws, but they're not even laws in the sense that Cygnus is trying to convey them. So, I mean, I'll even pose this to Cygnus. Does Cygnus even know that the laws of the Pentateuch are not legislative in any sense at all? We don't go by the letter of the law. We go by the spirit of the law. I wonder if he knows the difference between that. So please get educated on these topics, man. Like you're making yourself look like a fool because there's a legal distinction and a ceremonial distinction. Those are two different things, and I'll yield.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if being able to back up my points with actual verses and not having to imagine things or misrepresent them is being ignorant, then again guilty. What was your last point there? I wanted to talk on that.
I think I was talking about ceremonial between.
Oh yeah. So you mentioned several times the casuistic and law and being the spirit of the law. Okay. Well, first of all, again, there's no support for that in the scripture. Okay. And I don't even see what the issue is with the distinction. I mean, if you're saying that, hey, there was no legal, the Bible doesn't say that it wasn't a legislative act that slaves could be treated like chattel, but it was only the spirit of the law. In the spirit of the law, they could be treated like chattel. I think that's kind of a desperate defense. But as far as it being only the spirit of law, I mean, there was at least one case where there was a law specified that you weren't allowed to pick up sticks on the Sabbath. Well, was that casuistic? Was it the spirit of the law, or was it an actual legal code? Because it then goes on to give an example of a man who's stoned to death because he's caught picking up sticks. I think that's
so
more
you
than the spirit of the law.
Okay, but before I address that, so you admit that there's a difference between ceremonial laws and legalistic codes, right? So you know that codes are not necessarily ceremonial. You agree, right?
I reject you. I'll say there's a difference between the spirit of the law and the actual law. Okay, but I mean, we're not ceremonial laws have to do with ceremonies, and these things, the laws we're talking about didn't have to do with ceremonies. I don't know about any ceremonies.
Well, that's what it was when they had the Passover meal. That's a ceremonial thing. It's a ritual, ceremonial ritual. There's no law that says you shall have a Passover. There's no law out there stating that.
I didn't say there was.
That is way out there.
But we're talking about the laws about how you should treat slaves. But we're talking about the laws about how you should treat slaves, and those are not ceremonial laws.
Right, so I'm just showing you don't even know do you know the difference between, again, do you know what a law code is and a ceremonial ritual? Do you know the difference?
Yeah, sure, but ceremonial doesn't come
what's the difference?
One are like just things you're supposed to do for a ceremony, but you're not going to be punished if you don't do them.
Okay, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. Okay. I mean, that's fair enough.
Now, I have to tell you, the laws we're talking about in Exodus 21, there's punishment. So those are not ceremonial laws.
Well, okay. Are we just going to bounce back and forth? I mean, are we going to stay on one text, or are you going to just shotgun these claims at me?
Well, you actually brought up the other text, Praise. You actually brought up the other text and misrepresented.
Well, we've been talking about that text. Now we're going to Exodus 21. So which one do you want to focus on? I'll let you pick.
Well, I want to talk about the spirit of the law versus casuistic. And casuistic law, and casuistic law versus legislative law. Now you're saying Exodus 21, is only speaking of casuistic laws, is only in the spirit of the law, or are those actual legal codes?
Okay, so the whole, I'm going to say this nice and slow so I know there's no type of misunderstanding here. The whole Pentateuch is casuistic outside the Ten Commandments. So that's 99.9999% of the Pentateuch is casuistic. So there you go.
So again, I will say I don't really care whether you call it casuistic or whether you say it's the spirit of the law or whether.
Do you know what casuistic means?
Yes, I don't care but you've used both words and I'm using both. Okay?
So what is casuistic law?
I don't really care whether you're saying so casuistically. It was okay to keep people as chattel slaves.
Do you even know what that means, man? Like, what is casuistic law? Explain to me what that is.
They're just guidelines. They're mere guidelines.
Nope.
Okay.
That's not what casuistic law is.
Okay,
No.
give me your definition. For God's
No,
sake.
I'm going to give you the definition that is the accepted. That's universally
Go for it.
accepted through.
Give it.
It means case law. That's what it means. Case law.
Okay.
It means conditionality, conditional laws. They're conditional.
Well, then you're absolutely wrong, because Exodus 21 isn't dealing with case law. It's not saying,
yes,
hey,
it is.
No,
this is where your ignorance is being a problem here.
No, it's not. It's not saying, hey, in this case, this was done. It's not saying in this case this was done.
Yes,
it is
that's
saying,
what it is.
If this happens, then you will do this. There's nothing in there that says, hey, you know, this is based on what we've done in the past.
So you're telling me something that is so. What kind of expertise do you have in Hebrew scholarship?
None, but I can read.
So you're telling me that it doesn't exist, but you don't even have any type of expertise. So I'm just going to let people figure. I'll let people see that for themselves. But let's talk about Exodus 21.
See who has the actual arguments.
I have been.
Wait. I'll let people see who's like citing some scholar someplace, okay, that happens to agree with them, okay, and I'll let people see who's actually saying what it says in the Bible. You're saying it's casuistic law, and you're saying that means it's based on case law. There is nothing in Exodus 21 that says anything about case law. Okay, case law is when you cite a previous case. Case law is when you say, hey, you know what? In this previous case, it was decided this way.
Yes, that's what it's there. That's what's there. Do you even know the history of the ancient Near East back then? It is.
Show me.
Nowhere. Hold on. Let me just respond to this really quick, and then we'll let you keep going there. There was no legal text, not one court document, nothing in any history documents that we have that shows that these were legislative. These were case laws, and I can give you a list of scholars out there that confirm that. I mean, that really is a consensus viewpoint.
Well, I also have to point out that case law can be turned into legislative law. Okay, so I mean, what we have in Exodus 21 is legislative law. It's saying if you do this, this will happen.
No. See, you have to show that these were legislated. These are only brought into temples by scribe. These were scribal exercises. Do you even know what that means? Tell me what a scribal exercise is.
No, I'm not playing that game. Tell me what these laws were for then. Exodus 21. What was the purpose of those laws?
To mitigate local social affairs. That's all it was used for.
So they were applied. Those laws were applied.
No. There was.
How did they not mitigate if they were not applied?
Okay, so you have to understand that when people are in court, so the judge didn't come out and have a rock and he goes, oh, look, this is law code number 75553.7, and this is what Yahweh commanded for this instance. That's not what they did. What they did is they extrapolated, hold on, let me finish. They extrapolated principles from the 10 Commandments, and that's what God expects us to do. So the spirit of the law overrides the letter of the law. This is what I brought in my presentation. You need to learn this stuff before you argue.
I think you need to explain again what those laws were for in Exodus 21. What was the point of citing
I'll tell you.
Writing those laws down if they were not meant to be applied?
So they were there to set guidelines so that the master could not be frauded. There's a loophole there. Do you see the loophole?
Okay, yeah, I heard this argument before. It has nothing to do with what we're talking about here. It
has everything to do with it.
No, it doesn't.
Do you see the loophole?
No, because I'm talking about all of Exodus 21. Okay, I'm all talking about all of Exodus 21. You're talking about a specific one. If you really want to bring that up, we can. It's lame, but you can. But Exodus 21, you know, you're saying the best you could say here, okay, is that Exodus 21 is the spirit of the law, and is what the local, you know, judges and magistrates should use as guidelines. That's the best you're saying, and the best you're saying.
I'm not even saying that.
Well, then what? Again, what were they for? You said it was used for the local courts and magistrates to
scribal exercises. That was it. Right. Scribal exercises. They were never intended to be anything otherwise, because again. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so when it says a Hebrew slave shall be let go in the 7th year after serving 6 years, that wasn't the case.
What you claim is a Hebrew is actually someone that is
Any
non-Israelite.
slave.
They are Canaanites.
It says a slave shall serve 6 years and go free in the 7th year. Okay.
Okay,
And
let
you're
me
saying,
ask you a question. Did Moses speak English? Did Moses speak English?
You're saying that wasn't a law.
This is how pathetic. I mean, come on, man. You need to at least come neutral with here. At least come to meet me somewhere in the middle. Like, if I know you're against the God of the Bible, whatever that is. I mean, I understand that because that's whatever that is with your atheistic worldview, and I'm trying to get you. Maybe we'll get you to convert later. But come meet me in the middle here at least. So
what's the middle?
The middle is that you're not being swayed. You're not being biased to your position. Let's just try to let's have a discussion here that isn't biased. Let's have a honest, genuine discussion. I'm trying to have that with you right now.
Those are ad hominems, okay? And
I'm just showing your bias. You are very biased here. You need to get educated before you come and have these arguments.
You're the one who's like misrepresented one verse, and now you're saying that all of Exodus 21 actually applies to
you're telling
slaves,
me, okay,
and you're saying that it's not that those laws weren't even like applied.
No. Okay, did Moses write in English? Yes or no? It's a yes or no question.
That's a no.
So why are you using the English to tell me what the Bible or the manuscripts say? Why are you telling me English words?
I'm using the translations.
That's English. Do you know what Hebrew is?
Please don't.
I've asked you the question. This is what I'm trying to get you to be in the middle, man. I'm not trying to be a pest here. I'm really not. I'm just trying to have an honest discussion with you.
No. When you ask me if I know what Hebrew is, you're not having an honest discussion.
Well, no, but you're not being honest because you know that the Hebrew manuscripts are not in English. So why are you bringing up English words to me?
Because we're having this debate in English.
Well, yeah, okay, I'll speak English, but we still have to appeal to the Hebrew, though.
What we have is translation after translation after translation after translation of scholars and experts throughout the centuries who have translated that as Hebrews, okay? And specifically Hebrews, not foreign slaves. And you are trying to tell me, that it actually isn't just Hebrews, it actually means foreign slaves. And you're trying to tell me that those laws didn't have any actual effect.
The word Hebrew is a very broad term, okay? In the ancient Near East, that's very broad. That could include people all the way from Egypt, Canaan. It could include all the people around that area. They could be Hebrews. The Hebrews were not relegated to a 500-yard space. Not
according to the people who translated the King James version or the International Standard Version or the NAS, whatever that is, the New American Standard Bible, etc. In 5 different places.
Can I give you some quotes, man? Like, I think this is becoming into the territory where it's getting very, you're getting lost, okay? So let me give you a couple, I'm going to give you one quote. I'll just give you one quote. This is from Christopher Wright. He's an ancient Near East scholar. I'm going to just get this quote real quick. I'm going to do hold on. Okay. It is now widely, though not universally agreed, that the word Hebrew is linked to the word Aparu or Habiru, which is found in a wide range of Mesopotamian Egypt texts. The term described a certain social stratum common throughout the ancient Near East, namely a class of landless people, which might include political refugees, displaced people, outlaws, and others. The Israelites were approximately called Hebrews while in Egypt. The word later became an ethnic name equivalent to Israel, but in the early legal text, the term Hebrew slave almost certainly refers to a non-native born Israelite, born to the landless people that dispossessed Canaanites and immigrants who survived by selling themselves in the labor and service of landed Israelite households. And this is why Christopher Wright.
What you described is pre-Genesis, pre-Exodus. Okay, that was originally, yes, they were called the Habiru, all right, because they were like nomads and wanderers. But later, and by the time this was written, which was like during the time they were in Babylon, Okay, Hebrew meant Hebrew.
So, okay, let me answer the question again. Is Hebrew, can that necessitate a foreign person, yes or no?
It depends on when you're using it. It depends on when you're using it. In the Bible, in Genesis, Exodus, and I guess there's a reference in Jonah as well, it is consistently translated as a Hebrew, and they refer to themselves as Hebrews. Okay, what you did is you quoted a scholar about who was talking about the etymology of the word, what its origins were. Okay, not what its particular uses were.
No, I was talking about the people from Canaan. You saw it yourself, and
Right.
I mean,
As a matter of fact, the Israelites arose from the
argument.
Canaanites.
It's anachronistic. No, you need to show
the Israelites
how.
arose from the Canaanites.
Well, first of all, you need to show how this was applied in the Pentateuch. It was afterwards. I don't see you can prove that. I think that's just speculation, conjecture on your part. The scholars certainly don't support your point. Name a scholar who uses avri in a native-born sense. I want to give me some citations, brother. Come on, man.
Yeah, sure. I'm citing 3 different versions of the Bible. Okay. And 5 different instances within the Bible, all of which are translated as a Hebrew. Okay.
Okay, but again, the Hebrew man? Okay, did Moses speak English? Yes or no?
Well, if you take a look at these verses, okay, they're pretty much all referring to Hebrews. So Jonah 1:9. Look it up.
Okay, so do you know what the Hebrew word for? Okay, do you know the word Hebrew in the Hebrew? Do you know what that is?
Ibri.
Thank you. Do you know how avri? Do you know what an avri was in the ancient Near East by scholars and historians and etc.? Do you know what they use? Do you know what an avri is? We have actual.
At what time? Again,
anytime.
What I have here, no, because a word has different meanings throughout time. Okay, what I have here is 3 different translations of the Bible by scholars at different points in time in history. Okay, going back to the King James up to the New American Standard, I guess, New American Standard Bible, and each time is translated as a Hebrew, referring to Hebrews, Israelites.
No, it's avri. Even you admitted that. So please use the right term. Yeah.
So no, it's referring to Hebrews as Israelites. Every single one of them.
No, it's avri. I'm saying you admitted that.
It says what?
Avri, and even you admitted that yourself. So I'm really kind of confused here. What you're trying to argue.
We're talking about the way it's translated. We're talking about what the translation is.
Okay, so tell me what the Hebrew word for Hebrew is again.
No, I'm not playing that game. Right now, I'm looking up Jonah 1:9.
Okay, right, it's a
if you have an argument,
even you admitted that, right?
If you have an argument, present it. So in Jonah 1:9, the word is used. In Jonah 1:9, it says, "And he said unto them, I am a Hebrew, and I fear the Lord God of heaven, which hath made the sea and the dry land." There he's referring to himself as a Hebrew. Not, as anybody, but specifically,
okay,
I'm a Hebrew. So I'm a member of this group.
Okay, so I'm going to give you another quote from a scholar. So
I don't care.
I always share my screen.
I really don't care, because what you're doing is you're taking these quotes and you're enlarging them, like you enlarged that verse, to make it sound like all foreigners were treated the same.
Okay, so I think you're just way out of your league here, man. This is beyond your pay grade. No, seriously, it's almost like you didn't even know the Hebrew was written in the Hebrew. Like the Hebrew manuscripts would be written in the Hebrew. Like you didn't even know that. Like that's pretty. The
last expert you cited, okay, was only talking about the etymology of the word. Okay, he did not say it's like universally used at this or could be used like this at all times.
No, it says it's linked.
Again, we have to take a look.
Okay, let me just give you another one. So the
we have
buying,
to,
hold on, let me just
Go ahead.
give you another one real quick. The buying of a Hebrew servant at Aved Avri at Exodus 21:2 would most likely refer to a foreign Hebrew servant, Leviticus 25:44-46. Okay.
yeah. I
So
don't care. Show me why. Show me why. Why would it
because
specify? Let's go back. Let's go to back to my question. Okay. Does Exodus 21:1 apply to only Hebrew slaves? Okay. Only foreign slaves, or both Hebrew and foreigners? Answer that question.
it applies both. Good point. Now you're
Okay, then
at
why
least
does it
you're
even
now
use the word Hebrew? Why does it even use the word Hebrew? Why
because
doesn't
it
it just say,
encompasses a huge amount of people. This is what I'm trying to get you to understand.
wouldn't
The
it
word.
encompass okay, wouldn't
Go
it
ahead.
encompass everybody if it just said if you buy a slave? What's the adjective in there for?
What do you mean slave? You mean Aved? Word,
Sure,
is
if
he,
you buy a
Aved,
slave,
is Aved
why
even
doesn't it
there?
just why I don't think it uses the word event. I think it uses something else. If you buy a servant, okay? If you buy it doesn't even use the word event. But why does it specify Hebrew? Because it could just say if you buy a slave.
Because English translators are ignorant on this issue, so that's the problem.
Well,
Maybe I guess there's quarrels with them. So you know,
okay. So now you're disagreeing with English translators. Okay. Well, let's look it up.
well, I mean, again, the manuscripts weren't written in English. I'm just saying,
Yeah, they weren't, but the people who
right?
translated them understood both English and Aramaic.
Well, it looks like not.
Wow.
Or they didn't
Now
elucidate, or they didn't
now we're suddenly
elucidate
going
it.
against
It's just a
authority.
general term. It's just a general term. It encompasses all sorts of people. You keep not understanding that. So I'm trying to explain it to you in simple terms. The word avri is encompassive. It's comprehensive. It can mean many different peoples. It could mean local-born people. It could mean non-local-born people. And according to scholars, they're saying non-local people here, and so that actually poses a huge predicament here, because if you say that foreigners can come on their own volition and they can leave on their own volition, then you can't say foreigners were enslaved. So chattel slavery is debunked.
So actually, the problem is that it's specifying an adjective when it doesn't need to. As a matter of fact, it does specify, it says a Hebrew servant. It uses Ibri Ebed.
So yes, we know
So
it
what is
comes
the-
from the word Eber. We know that. I told you that. I
but
never
what is-
explained that to you.
What is the point of having the Ibri in there? Why not just say Ebed?
Well, it does in the very next word. It says Hebrew Aved.
Right, but what's the point of the adjective Hebrew?
Great point. Maybe that's showing you that this is telling you that this is a non-Hebrew servant, actually.
Okay, so these laws, so non-Hebrew servants would go out after 7 years?
Yeah.
Even though I have another verse, two other verses that say that they shall serve for life and be passed on as inheritance.
Well, in fact, let's talk about that. No,
ridiculous.
let me address that. So,
Yeah.
one of them in Leviticus 25, you agree that one of them is mentioned in verse 45, right?
I'm sorry, say that again.
So, in verse 45, you agree that in verse 46 that you can inherit them and have them as property forever, right? In verse 45, you agree with that, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now here's where your position's completely shot down. So the word there, the foreigner there, hold on, let me finish. The word there in the Hebrew is toshab. These people are called toshabs. Well, in verse 47, right after the one where it says property inheritance forever, it says that you may wax rich. And not only do that, they can be the masters of Israelite Aveds, the same one mentioned in verse 45. Debunked.
I think you know what, I would go after that, okay, but I think you're just trying to distract from the fact that you can't support your claim that Exodus 21
I just supported it. It's a toshab.
I know. No, this is.
I mean, I
this
have
is
great
the area
respect
I'm
for
not
you,
even gonna take
Cygnus.
that.
I'm just saying you need to get more into some of the
So
scholarship and learn
I
some more of this stuff. That's all.
yeah. No, I think I already know more about it than you, buddy, because I'm looking at it and I've actually looked at it and read it and tried to understand it. And I have to ask why the word Hebrew is in there as an adjective. You don't have an answer for that.
I
Okay.
did.
I'm gonna jump
The
in
word
here.
Hebrew of free is an expansive name or words. I already
Okay,
brought that up.
I'm gonna jump in here real
Yeah.
quick, gentlemen.
And you have,
Uh,
and again, if we look at my principles, okay, that I use for following for interpreting text, okay, and you can try to attack those if you want, okay. I say you need to minimize the contradictions, okay,
There
and
is no contradictions, just your misunderstandings, my
uh,
friend.
when
And
it
it's just
says
out of ignorance, and you just don't know this stuff. You need to get into this
yeah,
stuff. That's all I'm saying.
so all
okay,
right,
guys, I'm just gonna jump in real
yeah,
quick because
I think we're done here because like every argument put forth, his only response seems to be, "I'm ignorant," and here's a citation that I think agrees with me, and I just I don't see the point of that. You want to open it up for questions?
yeah. So here's what I want to do, gentlemen. It was a lively discussion. It's been a great chat the entire time. We're going on 2 hours. Therefore, just
Wow, that
so
was
you
fast.
both, yeah, time has flown by, and I want you both to feel that you've had ample time, equal time to make your points, address each other's points. Therefore, what I want to do here before we go into the audience Q&A, and I do got a lot of good questions related to the topic. So why don't we take uninterrupted time for kind of a closing statement just to wrap up your points, and not really a time limit, just take a couple minutes, few minutes. I don't want you to feel the pressure. And Cygnus, since you started, why don't we throw it over to you? Take as much time as you need.
You know what? I feel at this point I don't even need to make a closing statement. So we'll leave that open for questions.
Okay, no problem. I just want you guys to feel as comfortable as possible.
Yeah, no problem. That's okay.
Awesome. I appreciate that. And Praise, if you wanted a minute or two to wrap up your thought.
Yeah, actually, I do.
The opportunities there. Go ahead.
I appreciate the platform. SFT did a great job moderating. You're one of the best out there. But also, I want to give thanks to Cygnus. I appreciate he hung in there with me. I mean, we disagreed. That's fine. It got a little heated. That's going to happen. I have utmost respect for Cygnus. I hope he didn't consider me disrespectful, because that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to educate people so they can learn and grow. And maybe if there's some biases or if there's some information that they might be lacking, and they can look this stuff up for themselves. And that's all I want in this debate, is people to learn stuff about the ancient Near East. It takes a lot of research, people. You can't just read a King James Bible and expect to understand things about the Old Testament. And I pray for Cygnus. I think I know he's not a believer, but maybe he will someday, and I pray for that. And I pray for people in the chat that they learn something. And if there's non-believers there, I pray that this discussion was fruitful. Maybe they'll have a different viewpoint about the Pentateuch. And I hopefully I wasn't disrespectful. That's not what I was intending to do. Yeah, I think to me, in my opinion, I covered most of his objections. I brought some arguments to the table. I brought citations. If you disagree with me, that's fine. But I appreciate it again, and I'm going to yield there. And God bless everyone.
Okay, well, I appreciate those final words, Praise. Thanks again to Cygnus and Praise for a great debate, and definitely one to remember, especially on this topic. So why don't we get right into the questions? We've also got quite a bit of super chats here. So I'm going to get through some of these super chats that don't really have a question attached to them. So Jerome M gives a $2 super chat. Thank you so much. I appreciate the support. We've got a $25 super chat from Alyosha. I hope I'm saying that right. Thank you so much for the support. I appreciate it. There's a comment here if you guys wanted to respond to it, of course. The comment is, seems odd in a debt-oriented economy to quibble over owning the future labor of people. If you guys had any thoughts to that comment, feel free to make a comment? Or...
Absolutely, yes. The whole ancient Near East was predicated on debt relief. We had people that were non-Israelites. They had problems with debt, and also the Israelites did as well. And that's what the whole... God was so awesome that he stopped, and he actually put a system in there. He instituted a system to keep out poverty. And I wish today we had that. Like this is an awesome system. And unfortunately, it gets misrepresented, and people like attack it. But it was actually a wonderful thing, a wonderful socioeconomic system back then. Of course, I mean, there's always downsides, the evil people, whatever. But by and large, it was pretty awesome.
I appreciate that response. Praise. Go ahead, Cygnus. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I would just say, I mean, we're talking about how oppressed people are treated. I don't think that's something that you quibble over. So I just thought that was kind of a weird choice.
Okay, I appreciate the responses, gentlemen. So let's go into, let's see here. Question. Okay, question here from Ook Salad. Ook Salad, thanks for your question. He says, question for both. Why does it matter whether the Bible condones slavery? It's a very old book from a very different society. He's got two, actually, attachments for the same question. It's bound to have societal incompatibilities with our current society. Why can't this issue just be dropped as a product of its times? Go ahead, gentlemen. It's for both. So whoever wants to start.
You want to take a Cygnus, or are you and me?
Yeah, I'll just say real quick that, gosh, it's late and my mind is getting muddled. So the question is, why do we discuss slavery in the Bible? It's because people still think that this is the inspired word of God, and they think that it's moral truths, and it's been said that those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities. What we see in the Old Testament is you can't hardly spit in the Old Testament without moistening some sort of atrocity. As long as that stuff in there, and as long as people are claiming that this is the inspired word of God, an all perfect, all moral being, then we do need to say, hey, is this actually moral or immoral? If people weren't putting it forth as a moral standard, we would not be talking about it.
Yes.
I appreciate the response. Go ahead, Praise. Go ahead.
Yeah, it matters to me gravely because our God hates injustice. He hates any type of oppression. Isaiah 58:6, our God hates it. He hates slavery. Jesus came to free the slaves, even people that are slaves to sin also. But there's all different types of form of slavery, but the Bible hates it. God hates it. He wants people to be to be freed from slavery, to be liberated. He's a liberator. He did that with the Hebrews out of Egypt, but he also does it with people that came into the covenant and proselytized. I love God. He's awesome. I hope people get to know him.
All right, guys, I appreciate the responses from both of you. So here's a $50 super chat from Pigs Can Fly. No question, just showing the support. I really appreciate it, Pigs. I appreciate all the support from you guys. I always say it, you're the life and blood of this channel. You're the reason why we can put on essentially daily shows. So I appreciate it. And another $50 super chat from Alyosha. So I hope I'm saying that right. If not, I apologize. And once again, I appreciate the super chat and the support. So question for Cygnus. So this one's for you specifically. And the question is, wouldn't it be prudent to look at how the Jews themselves worked these questionable laws?
Well, isn't that what we're doing when we look in the Bible? Isn't that what they were saying back then? I think we are looking at how they work these questionable. Well, I don't know. I mean, whether the questionable is kind of a leading question, okay? But if we want to look at like how people were treated, at that time, the Old Testament is a window on that.
Okay, I appreciate that response. Oh, okay. And no, Praise, if you wanted to have a response, and then as we always do, we'll hand it back to Cygnus. Since the question was for him, he gets the last word. So go ahead, Praise.
No.
I think go ahead, man.
No. I thought you were passing. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, yes, the Hebrews were always trying to learn these things, these dynamics of the Pentateuch, because a lot of them were law precedent, what we call case laws. But I think everything derived from the Ten Commandments. The Hebrews knew that, the non-Hebrews knew about that. So I'll just leave it there.
And Cygnus, the question was for you originally, so you get the last word.
No, that's it. Okay. It's fine.
No problem. So $5 super chat here from Raymond Gyoza Dango. I appreciate the super chat and the support. Praise supports ownership of players from Madden with a controller icon. So Praise, how do you answer that one, bud?
That's actually a great comparison, though, because that's the way I take it. It's sort of like sports teams. The owners they own the contracts to the players, and if they don't uphold something to the contract, then they're released from the team or whatever, or they don't get their money, their millions, whatever it is. So I think that's actually a good comparison, but it's hilarious too. I love Madden, but now the new one's going to suck because it's the PS5. It's like $500 now.
PS5 now, right? I think they hold back on the graphics just a little bit each time, or else they would just do PS1 and it's done. So I appreciate that. Cygnus, did you want a response, or do you want me to move on to the next one?
I don't even play video games, so no, I don't I don't think it's morally wrong to own virtual characters. That's fine.
Okay, no problem. And Godzilla Freak says, there's something I like about SFT's butchered Japanese pronunciation. Yes, I need to take some lessons or some classes or something. So I apologize. Here's a super chat that just came in from One Cow Stampede. $20 super chat. Thanks for all you do. No, thank you. Thank you guys for the support. This is awesome and overwhelming to see all this amazing support. So I appreciate it. And let me see. Question here from Jungle Jargon, $5 super chat. Thank you so much, Jungle. Question for Cygnus. Do you know who Eber is? He's not an Israelite. He is the father of the Hebrews. Go ahead, Cygnus.
Eber? Spell it? How does he spell it?
E-B-E-R.
Google. No, I don't know. Eber. No, I have not heard that one.
Wow, thank you, Jungle. Awesome, man.
Do I need to? What does that have to do with slavery in the Bible or anything?
Well, it shows that the word Hebrew there is not really a local, homeborn native Israelite. It's actually foreign, a non-Israelite.
Again, I'm not concerned with the etymology of the word. I'm concerned with how it's used in the Bible. How it's used in Genesis and Exodus. And in there, it consistently refers to.
It goes both ways. Yeah, I mean, it's used in a foreign sense and it's used in a non-foreign sense.
I can't find a single instance being where used in a foreign sense in the Bible. All the translations I find are specify, are referring to people of the Israelite tribes.
Yeah, I should have cited those, but they're there. I'll get it to you though. I'll email you.
All right, gentlemen. Thanks for keeping it lively. So question from Hate Love Nothing. Thanks for your question, Hate Love Nothing. Question for both. Which was more moral, slavery in the Bible as it was regulated by God, or the slavery observed in the rest of history? The question is for both. Therefore, whoever wants to answer first, go ahead.
Could you repeat it one more time, please? Sorry.
Yes, no problem. So which was more moral? Slavery in the Bible as it was regulated by God, or the slavery observed in the rest of humanity?
Well, the rest of humanity is pretty huge. There was probably some that was worse in humanity, and the slavery in the Bible was worse than a lot as well. So I don't know where it would fall in the spectrum.
Okay, I
Pretty
appreciate
bad.
the
Pretty bad.
No problem.
People could be kept for life and beaten, etc. It was certainly much worse than debt servitude.
So I would say it's the best ever. I think it's the highest standard. Well, I would say, yeah, the best socioeconomic system, which we would call debt servitude or indentured servitude. And we had laws that protected fugitive runaway slaves from other countries. We protected them. We gave asylum to them. We also have stipulations that protects a foreign event. Exodus 21. If you even smite or whatever it is, whatever form, eye for an eye, burn for a burn, tooth for a tooth, whatever you want to call it, that they had the law of lex talionis on their side. There's no laws anywhere in the history that have these. God put those in there to protect people, to even protect the master as well. I was going to go into that, but I guess we didn't have time tonight. But obviously, at the very height of all would be the Mosaic socioeconomic system.
So could the best slavery of all have been improved? Like maybe if it said, "Hey, you can't beat your slave," or everybody goes free in 6 years. Or you can't even keep people for life? Could it not have been improved by saying, hey, you hire these people instead?
Well, how do you...
You're saying this is the best slavery ever. Okay. I think that's funny.
Praise, did your audio go out?
Yeah, it did. I'm back. You guys hear me?
Yes, you're back.
Yeah, I guess my response was I don't see where it says beating anything in the text. I think that's somewhat speculation or conjecture. It's eisegesis.
You're saying beating is not in the text?
No, nowhere.
Oh my God. Well, oh, you're God. I mean, it's right there.
Well,
It's
you guys,
how much of the scriptures you have to actually deny in order to justify them?
We should have been able to, I guess we didn't have time, but I would have loved to discuss it with you, and I guarantee you I would have squashed that point, but we'll have to wait till another time.
I guarantee you would have said, hey, it doesn't say what it obviously says. The best slavery ever.
Nope, I just think you're ignorant.
Okay.
Well, I know you guys always have a round in the chamber. You've kept this a good, engaging debate. So I appreciate the responses here. Let's move on to let's get through these because we've got, let's see, 2 super stickers, one from Jamie. I appreciate it. One from Raymond again with the popcorn icon. So this has been quite the show and very entertaining for people, so, and hopefully informative, so I appreciate it. We're coming down to the last couple questions here. This question from Pigs Can Fly question for this one's for you, Cygnus. So he says,
I know Pigs Can Fly is asking me questions.
I appreciate you being a good sport. It does look like most of the questions are for you, Cygnus, so I appreciate it. And right. He says why he thinks Hagar was raped and it's condoned, but when Absalom killed his brother for raping his sister, this is obviously not condoned. How do you square this?
Well, and that was a familial relationship, not a master-servant relationship. Now, I don't know that Hagar had any brothers around to defend her or revenge her. She was actually from Egypt, I believe. So I ain't seeing the issue there.
Okay, I appreciate the response. Did you want me to go on to this last question, Praise, or did you want a quick response to that?
Quick response, yeah, I'll make it pithy. So the word there, or Abraham had a reputation. He had a great reputation for being taking care of people. I wish people look into Abraham's history around him. So that alone shows you his reputation alone proves that there is no chattel slavery right there.
Well, I bet Abraham was the greatest slave owner ever.
History.
And with that, let's move on to you guys are keeping this fun. I like it. So this one's just a comment. and we are going on 2.5 hours, so you guys got a lot of endurance, which means we're going to end it with this last super chat, which isn't a question. It's just a comment, and then we got one last question for the both of you, and we're going to call it a night. It's 2.5 hours long, and we still got 50 people in the chat, so you guys brought the numbers and put on a good show. So super chat from Jamie Russell. I appreciate the super chat. $5 says, Calvary has shown us our God and his mercy and justice while we were yet sinners. Give if you can. I appreciate the super chat, Jamie Russell. And last question for the both of you. We'll end it with a bang. Question from Gavin Hurleyman. I guess it's a question for Cygnus. I thought it was for the both of you guys, but he says, please, can you quote the scripture that says a master can beat his slave and it's all good as long as the slave doesn't die in the following 2 days?
Well, it's Exodus. Do I really need to? I mean, this question seems almost rhetorical. It's not like the guy asking, whoever's asking it obviously already knows what the response is. So it's in Exodus 21. Let me see here.
I'd like to respond to that after.
Yeah, go ahead and respond while I look it up, or maybe you can have the verse. I don't see the point of this question. But,
yeah. So actually, if you read it, okay, go ahead.
Let's see. No, go ahead.
So if you actually read Exodus 21:20, it's in the Hebrew. It says punish. That if a master somehow gets into a quarrel with his slave, which you could say beat, sure, I'll even give you the word beat there. But if the master does that unjustly, he shall be punished. And it's a infinitive absolute grammar construct. It signifies a certain death penalty. That means that non-native born servants or veds or slaves, debt slaves, if you want to call them that, they had the same value as freeborn people. So that completely destroys chattel slavery as well.
All right. So the verse, which again speaks for itself, is verse 20 and 21. And if a man smite his servant or his maid with a rod, and he die under his hand, he shall be surely punished. Notwithstanding, if he continue a day or two, he shall not be punished, for he is his money. And again, that applied to Hebrew servants. As Exodus 21:1 is very clear about that.
Death penalty.
All right. Okay, gentlemen, thank you. We got one final super. Oh yeah, go ahead, Cygnus.
Well, death penalty if he dies within a day or two.
Well, do you know why the day or two? Hold on. Do you know why the day or two is there? Do you know why?
I heard your explanation, and again, it's not supported by the text. You're going to claim that it was because it was to protect the master, because we need a lot of slaves to protect the masters. Okay.
Well, do you know why? Because he can make it up. There's a loophole. Right.
But of course, that's nowhere. There's nothing in the text that indicates that is there.
Well, it does, because it's casuistic law. So you don't understand that. Again, you're ignorant.
Even if it was casuistic law, that would still not indicate that the purpose of it was to protect the master from bribery.
Because there's a million different hypotheticals. You know, this is where you need to understand. I'm serious, man. You need to learn and get some education on this and research, because you're making yourself look like a clown. But again, you're just ignorant.
Specifically, you are saying it was specific. You didn't say how it's because it was vague and there's a million different reasons. You said it was specifically to protect the master from being libeled or slandered. From false charges.
What there had to be a deliberation. They just can't arbitrarily on a whim say, okay, you're innocent. No, they need 2 or 3 witnesses. They need to have the evidence. It takes a few days to get the evidence. Hello.
This isn't even speaking of this. This isn't about how quickly the trial occurs. This is about how long he lives before he dies. So again,
it has nothing to do with death. It has nothing to do with that. Where does it say die? Show me where in the text it says die.
It says, and he die under his hand, he shall be surely punished. Notwithstanding,
no, the next verse. You said,
I'm going, and if he continue a day or two, he shall not be punished. So if he goes a day or two and doesn't die, he will not be punished.
Right. Do you know why? Because they want to find out if it's unwarranted or warranted, to see if it was unjust, if he unjustly beat a servant. What if, let's say, hold on,
this
let me
has
just
nothing
give
to
you.
do with whether it was just
What
or
if the
not.
event was raping his daughter and he beat him with a rod there? Are you going to say that's unjustified?
Well, can't he actually like claim that in a court of law?
That's the whole point. That's why the 2 or 3 days are needed. There's a loophole there. Like, you don't even realize this, man. You
You're
need to
conflating.
look at the text. Not
You're
in
conflating
this.
how long the man lives with how quickly the punishment is and the trial is held, and those are two different things. So
A
again,
day
you're
or
making
two.
stuff up.
I mean, even 24, even less than a day. There's no. It's an idiom. It could mean it's any amount of time. You need to do your research.
The verse says nothing about that. You need to actually, acknowledge what the text says and not make up stuff to make
Casuistic law. Look it up. Yes, that's what it indicates in casuistic law.
Excuses. No, casuistic law would not specify, okay, the reason that you gave.
Right, case law. You know what case law is, of course.
Fails. Even your excuse fails.
Law of precedence. Look up law of precedence. Good gosh.
Well, looks like you guys just had a round 2 right there. So this has
good.
been good. This has been good. One to remember. I know you guys could probably go at this all night. One final super chat just came in from Alyosha. $50 super chat again. I appreciate it. I can't say thank you enough. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much. I think this is a response to something you guys said earlier. Maybe you will remember. But the comment is, I got it up on screen. No, I meant in the tradition over time. Not sure if you guys wanted to say anything to that, or
I don't get that. What? No, I meant in the. Did you understand the question, Craig?
This might be connected to another question that was posed before. I think that's like an addendum to that. Importance and knowledge with the U.S. debt load.
I think it was connected to the. Let me see. I think I got it saved up here. I think it's connected to this one. Important to acknowledge with the U.S. debt load, we are putting debt on our unborn children. Those without sin cast the first
stone. I'm kind of confused on this one.
It's right here. It's right here.
I agree. We are putting debt on our children, but I don't see what that has to do with this discussion.
I put it up on screen. Another $50 super chat. So
okay, so it's like modern type of debt servitude today. That's a good point. Yeah.
Well, I can't thank you enough.
I mean, those are legitimate issues to discuss. But I said at the beginning, like I'm not interested in like people who are saying, it doesn't impinge on this discussion at all, because those are just metaphorical.
Well, I want to say thank you again to everybody for your super chats, your super stickers, all your support. Thanks so much for some great questions in the chat. If I missed any, I apologize, but we are going on 2.5 hours. It's definitely been a long debate, although I got to say the 2.5 hours has flown by. It's been a lot of fun. This debate could not have been possible if it wasn't for Praise and Cygnus for being generous enough with your time anyway. So, gentlemen, thank you again for doing this debate. It was definitely a great debate. Yeah. Gentlemen, if you guys had some final words, go ahead. The floor is yours. Final words, and then we're going to shut it down for the night.
Yeah, it's up to you, Cygnus, or you, whatever.
Yeah, I'd just like to say, thank Praise for having this debate with me. And I appreciate that he was flexible with the time that I had at the opening. It seemed to me he really wanted to get the ideas out there. And and I think we had a fairly civil exchange and fairly equal time. I thought that was pretty good. So thank you.
No problem. I appreciate it. And Praise, any last words?
Yeah, I voiced the same what he said too. That was pretty. It was kind of passionate, but so what? Like that's the way debates should be. I mean, we disagree. That's fine. I appreciate him coming to the plate. He stood in the plate, and it was a good exchange, and maybe we both can. I probably can learn something from the debate. I hope he does too, and I hope the crowd does as well. And again, thank you for your time, Cygnus. That was a big chunk of time, 2.5 hours. So thanks again, and God bless everyone.
Well, like I always say, we all get passionate during debates. It can get heated, but as long as we shake hands at the end of the day, that's all that matters. So I want to thank you guys again. Everybody in the chat is saying thank you to the both of you guys for making for such a great debate. And it looks like there's a lot of comments asking if there's an after show. I'm not entirely sure if there is.
Yeah,
Praise,
there's one of mine. Yeah.
Okay, so after show on Praise's channel. And that being said, we'll see you guys in 2 days on the 2nd for a debate between Boy and Nephilim Free on evidence for the Christian God. So everybody, thanks again. God bless. SFT is out.